Hello and welcome to She TV, the place to become powerfully feminine from the inside out. I'm Candice Oneida. Today I'm going to talk to you about the difference between the false feminine and the true feminine. So what is this thing, false feminine, true feminine? Well, let me give you a little bit of background if I could. So when I went through what I went through and got totally burnt out, I was totally exhausted. I had been successful outwardly, but I was totally dying on the inside. And I went through my process of discovery as to what feminine is and means and feels like. What I realized was when I looked out there in the world around me, people didn't really know what masculine feminine meant, and those words were bandied around in such a way that was frankly creating more confusion and less clarity. Now, I have a background in astrology. I've been studying astrology for 20-something years, and in astrology there's this concept where there's always a lower mode and a higher mode of planets or planetary forces. And what I realized was, the same thing applies to masculine and feminine. There's a false or a lower mode of masculine and feminine, and there's a true or higher mode of masculine and feminine. So I set about creating a model, a framework of what that would look like. I basically had this huge aha when I realized that, that's why I didn't want to be feminine. I didn't want to be the false feminine. What I was seeking to be was the true feminine. And then the next thing I found was that there were few to zero role models out there as to how to be in the true feminine. So here I am wanting to show you this model because it's such a powerful way with which to experience yourself and to see the world around you. So let me start with this. We've got the false feminine, which is that of the Maid and the Priestess. And then we have the true feminine, that of the Queen and the Priestess. And every time I'm doing this with my hands, it's because this is the lower mode or the false mode. And this is the true mode or the higher or elevated form of that. These are what I call the 4 feminine archetypes. And we tend to have a dominant archetype, although we do run between them. Okay? So let's start with some ways to describe the Maid. So the Maid is essentially outward, out-focused. What I mean by that is she's focused on the world around her. She feels outside of the world. She feels separated from it. She really feels very worthless, alone often. She feels like she's constantly in servitude, really, to things in the world around you. She's frustrated. She feels like a victim. She feels like she doesn't have any power over her environment. She essentially, in a core essential ways, feels very powerless. The Maid doesn't like being there, but she finds herself feeling and believing that she's really stuck there. And of course she isn't. She just doesn't have the role models to help her to get to where she needs to go. So let's move to the Princess, the next in the false feminine archetypes. So the Princess is essentially outward in focused. What I mean by that is she takes all of her clues from the world around her, from things outside of her as to how she should feel, think or be. 3 words that really describe the Princess are blame, shame and criticism. Now whether she's doing it to herself or to those around her, that is a really cool way to describe the Princess. And I think you know what I mean. The Princess essentially also feels powerless, although her way of doing it is to fight against things. She's often very dramatic and creates dramas, as opposed to the Maid who kind of slumps in defeat. She fights out against things. The Princess doesn't have a strong sense of self. She's not centered and she's not grounded. She wants a lot more. She really does, but she really just doesn't know how to be in her body and doesn't know how to be in her center and her domain of her body. And she doesn't own and love her body and sexuality in a way that the true feminine does. She can use it sometimes to manipulate to get what she wants, but she's essentially believing that she has to fight and manipulate to get what she wants, as opposed to knowing that she can have what she wants, which is the order of the true feminine. So let's move to the true feminine, and let's start with the Queen. The Queen is essentially in-out focused, as in she is so aware of her inner environment and what's happening inside of herself. She seats herself very centrally inside herself. She knows herself. She knows her strengths and weaknesses. and she has probably done a lot of transformation work to get there. The Queen is a person who is big on appreciation. She appreciates herself. She appreciates others verbally and consciously a lot of the time. She's full of gratitude, and she also speaks those gratitudes a lot. The Queen knows what she wants. She knows what she desires, and she has discovered the full depth of her desire without any conditioning. And she knows how to ask for what she wants and then to receive them. The Queen is seated in her body, her throne, her pussy, and her energy. She is proud and loving of her body and her sexuality, and she loves to engage and share that with others, her partners, etc. The Queen is the queen of her domain, and her domain essentially starts centered in her body. And then if she is an advanced queen, she is also the queen of her environment, her community, her projects, or her businesses. And then let's move to the Priestess. The Priestess is inward-in focused. She derives all of her direction from inside and her relationship to consciousness and spirituality. Spiritual connection and the divine are alive in her, and she commands both her energy, her body of energy, as well as spiritual forces. She is the one that is in the position to connect to spiritual worlds. The Priestess is in service. She is in service of others. She is in service of the divine. And she can be of service because she knows how to plug in, turn on, and fill up with energy. Basically, she knows how to be plugged in to an infinite source of energy and divine connection. She is generous of her time and her heart. The Priestess has mastery over the sexual space where it's plugged into deep, deep, rich sources of nourishment, joy, expression, and sexual delight. Okay, so that's the 4 feminine archetypes. I'm going to suggest that you click up here and take my What's Your Desire archetype quiz. And what this is going to show you is what your dominant archetype is today. I want to implore that we all run between the archetypes, and the level of mastery it takes to be a priestess is something that takes quite a while to do. So let's be honest there. And to be in your queen, well, it's inside you. It's inside all of you. And that's what my work is here to do. And I do that in its most deep, rich fashion inside of the Powerfully Feminine Sisterhood. If you have any queries about that, you can ask me that here too. So take the What's Your Desire archetype quiz and get to know your 4 feminine archetypes and start to watch it out there in the world around you. It's absolutely fascinating. If you liked my video today, give me a thumbs up. I love to get comments on feedback on what's your feminine archetype. And if you have any questions about it, I'd love to engage you there too. And remember, when you have the courage to go out there and shine, you give others permission to do the same. So let's all go out there and shine this week. Bye-bye for now.